Welcome to the Justice-Watchers podcast. This is a series by Defenders Coalition, an organization that works to champion for the safety, security, and well-being of human rights defenders here in Kenya. I'm Kevin Mochiro, and I'll be your host for this season. This is the second season of the Justice-Watchers podcast, where human rights defenders not only explore the most pressing issues, but also get to share and tell their stories candidly and boldly. During this season, the podcast sets to amplify the voices of women human rights defenders on the front lines, sharing powerful stories that inspire action for equality and human dignity. Defenders Coalition is proud to recognize the work of women human rights defenders here in Kenya. And our guest on this episode is Masafu Okwara. Masafu is a leading human rights lawyer and activist at the National Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission, NGLHRC, as it's popularly known here in Kenya. Through her work, she champions the rights of the LGBTQI+ community, offers crucial legal aid, and advocates against discrimination and violence, and is a proponent of queer joy. Masafu, it is an honor to have you here on the Justice-Watchers podcast. Karibu sana.
Asante sana, Mochiro.
It's kind of bizarre because we know one another in so many other forums, and this is the first time we are having a proper one-on-one.
Yeah.
I'm kind of overwhelmed and excited. How does this feel for you?
It just feels at home. It feels like we're having a fireside chat. So I'm excited for you.
Karibu, and I intend for us to have like a fireside chat. You and I have known one another for a while, but in the more professional sense. But who is Masafu Okwara, and how did she get to where she is now?
Masafu Okwara is an introvert, but an introvert who is very headstrong. I enjoy the sound of the river. I am a Black African lesbian who's in a happy relationship. I enjoy the concept of family. I enjoy nurturing plants. And I love rumba.
You love rumba?
I love rumba.
Uh-huh.
I also love bongo because there's a way that bongo singers, glorify women and speak positively about women in their songs. So I do enjoy bongo. Other than that, I'm just a quiet nerd with a very big heart that is very passionate about people like me.
Okay. Looking back to the younger Masafu, who was she? Apart from being an introvert, and was she also a rumba lover?
Younger Masafu grew up in, those traditional militant patriarchal homes. And I think unsubconsciously my activism started then because I was such a headstrong child who would ask why. Quietly, but ask why to every situation. Ask why mom was the only one who was cooking at home, or ask why we had to sit next to a boy in school. So I'd ask why to a lot of things. And when I think back, I think my activism started like that and subconsciously. I grew up in a relatively silent town. In Kitale and partially Nairobi.
Nice, uh-huh.
My mother was a teacher. My mother is a retired teacher, and I enjoyed reading. She would carry a lot of books from her library in school, and so I would just enjoy reading. Other than that, I grew up as a tomboy. I was a child who enjoyed clothes that were not dresses, anything that was not a dress. So I grew up climbing trees, taking cows to the river, reading a lot. And also I got into trouble because I would come back from school holding hands of other girls. So bring children to my home. So I would come home with like a lot of children coming back from school, so their parents would then have to pick them up from our home. I was a jovial child, but also introverted. Yeah.
Masafu, sometimes we as activists people only see us at this. And I know you've touched on it, and I'd like us to touch on it a little bit more on your journey into just fully embracing who you are. And are you surprised that you find yourself in this place fighting for queer rights? And yeah, how is that tied to your own coming, if there is a tie, to your coming out journey?
I grew up, the household that I grew up in, there was no space for dissent. You're not allowed to answer back, talk back, or anything. So I grew up to know that I was supposed to keep a lot of my opinions to myself and was just supposed to follow the path that had been, pitched out for all of us as a child. So I had to hide a lot of myself. I had to hide such huge parts about myself as a child. One thing, however, I was happiest in school, because in school, there was the eye of the patriarch wasn't there. So in school, I was my happiest. I would, play with girls, just be myself at school. So moving fast forward, when I went to law school, when I joined law school over about a decade ago, more than a decade ago, it's old.
Hapo zamani za kale.
Hapo zamani, wasagaji wa kongwe.
Kabisa. Wasagaji wa kongwe.
So,
I love it.
When I joined law school, my journey to becoming an activist, I think, was built out of necessity. I was in a relationship, and considering how culturally conservative Eldoret was, because my law school was in Eldoret, and I still had to hide a lot of parts about myself, had to hide my attraction to girls and women at that time. And when I was in law school, I was also excited to read about the law, because the law at that time felt like the only pathway to actually communicate and build my power. So in Eldoret, I immersed myself a lot in, just studying the law and understanding the law, until in second year, when I was in this beautiful relationship and I underwent intimate partner violence. So being a law student, in my naivety at that time, I figured, I am a law student. This is what the theory says. So, of course, the practice of the law must be the same. So I went to report the case at the police station, and I ended up being the one who was arrested.
Oh, wow.
So that experience in itself, as a young law student at that time, I could not bridge the gap or understand why there was such incongruence between what the law that we're being taught in class and the practical bits of the law. So from that time, I think now my activism was cemented. The minute I left that cell.
So they actually locked you up?
They locked me up.
For how long?
They locked me up from Friday to, I think, Monday. And the period that I was locked up, a lot of the questions were why.
Still asking why.
Still asking, they were asking, mnapigana aje na mwanamke mwenzako, or how do you get beaten up with a woman? So I was meant to sit in a cell and have to made to quote unquote think about why I'm not attracted to men, or why, and stuff like that. It was an unpleasant experience. So when I walked out of that cell, I think I sort of got my awakening, because just as a young law student then, I needed to understand why the law was as it was, the practical aspects of the law was as it was. So I went back. I remember going back to my house that time, and I could not understand. So that's how I started doing a lot of research, even within the law that you were being taught in school, to understand why there was a difference within the law that you were learning in class and qua ground.
Clearly.
Ground, things were so different. So at that time, I started looking for community in Eldoret. Then I found Q Initiative, Kina Festas.
This is an LGBTQ group
Yes,
that is
an LGBTQ plus. Do you know, I keep forgetting that we
Yeah,
are on
yeah.
a podcast and I keep imagining it's just you and me.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right.
So yeah, at that time I found community and I found, other queer women like me. And it was now okay for me to just be myself. I started feeling more comfortable to dress, to express my gender expression as masculine at that time. And I started coming out to myself slowly by slowly. So to answer your question, I think my activism was cemented out of necessity to right a wrong that I experienced. And I could not imagine, at that time, I did not even picture that there was queer organizing or there was perhaps another queer person, perhaps another lesbian like me. At that time, even just saying the word lesbian was, you would only whisper it. You'd only whisper that word. So I began doing a lot of research to understand what exactly the law says about, sexual orientation and gender identity, and began putting words into it. So I would link up with other queer law students, and we would sit in discussion groups and just, really talk about what the law indeed said about queer people. Even though at that time we didn't have words about, words like queer or lesbian. We just knew, lesbian, gay, trans, intersex. So I did my dissertation and wrote about and put my heart into that dissertation, wrote about, the law and the nexus between the law, sexual orientation, and gender identity and its application. So from that, my activism started. And then after law school, went to the Office of the Attorney General, did some work there, put my head down. After I'd learned the hooks and crooks of the law and its applicability, then I sought out community, heard about what other queer lesbians who are lawyers were doing out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that you say that. Can we say then your justice, your queerness and your sense of justice was birthed within the cells of a police station?
The cells of a police station.
Looking back, I mean, that's for me, I would be honest, that's one of my biggest fears. But being in the cell, did you question this thing? No, and I take you back. So you said you didn't have the language, but you went to the cops to say you are being assaulted. But did you say my girlfriend or mwenzangu or I'm being assaulted by another woman? Because you were still discovering around your own sexuality. You're still discovering your own sexuality.
I actually reported them with just their name.
Okay.
I was assaulted by this person, and then the questions were flowing. Huyu mtu ni nani kwako? Kwa nini mnapigana? Na mbona mnaishi pamoja? Mko na uhusiano gani? So they were badgering me to answer a lot of those questions. And I think they could tell from when I was writing my statement, because as a law student, you're told when you're giving, a statement at the police station, you have to give factual statement.
Details, kabisa.
Details. So I gave the details because this was my first contact with the, criminal justice system. So I gave the details, the name. At first, I just started with the name, and then they badgered me. Threatened me with, imprisonment at that time. And it's interesting because at that time, I still had not familiarized myself with, the Penal Code section 162 and CN 165. So that was the situation.
But it's really interesting. I love the fact that for you, you knew there was an injustice that had been done to you, period. And you went to seek justice, period. I think there's a beautiful innocence there where I'm like, and we're being taught about this.
Yeah.
So me naenda kwa karao, only to discover. And I just sort of want to fast track there is the case of the late Edwin Chiloba, who was also a victim of intimate partner violence, and he died almost 3 to 4 years ago. And you were involved in that case as well. Did that give you more impetus to be involved and to seek justice, considering you were also, sadly, Edwin did not have the voice to speak about the violence that he was facing, and yet you did? Did that give you greater impetus to be involved in seeking justice for Edwin?
Absolutely. Also, just the realization that what happened to Edwin could easily have been any of us, any of us. And it was so important, it was so personal, not just to me, but I think to all of us. The collective anger and the collective disappointment we all had, just realizing that our sibling was subjected to that that nature of hostility, and I don't even think I have the right word for it. So yeah, it was important for me, as not just as a queer person in Kenya, but as a human rights lawyer who specifically focuses on sexual orientation and gender identity, to make sure that the lawful procedures were followed to the letter, including from the moment that Edwin's body was found. That, all of us at the commission, it was so important that the evidence collection, the process of collecting evidence was followed to the letter. That we had to be present to ensure that, legal vigilance, because it was so personal to all of us, and we were carrying the grief of all of our queer siblings across the country. So even for me as an individual, it was very personal to make sure that everything that went through that process, including the submissions, including, the investigation brief of the DCI, was actually that Edwin's voice and rage and anger and the pain he went through before, his last minutes was reflected in those documents. So yes, it had a lot of effect, because it was very important for us and for me as a person to make sure that we defend against such kind of injustice and, speak for Chiloba. I could go on and on about that particular case. I think we would need an entire episode. But yeah, we just made sure that everything was followed to the letter. There was sufficient legal vigilance, that at no point was this convicted person out on bail, because, that would significantly beat the purpose of justice.
Okay. And Masafu, what would you tell anyone who is undergoing intimate partner violence and they want to seek justice? What advice would you give them?
Number one, to be gentle with themselves. Understand that it's not their fault that they're in that position. And number two, to stand up for themselves. Stand up for themselves.
How? Because part of that is that you feel you're being disempowered, kabisa. Maybe a tip on how.
A tip on how is to get to the next day. Be gentle with yourself. Get to the next day. I understand that, unfortunately, the criminal justice system in Kenya is not empathetic to survivors of intimate partner violence at all. And just getting to the next day, being gentle with yourself, getting to the next day, and getting to the next day also means that, getting from your house even to the police station, or just picking up the call to reach out to a friend, or picking up a call to reach out to a therapist, or picking up the phone to reach out to, to a service provider. So just those steps. Also, the unfortunate thing about our criminal justice system is that when you're a survivor of intimate partner violence, often you are forced to retell your story so many times. and you're forced to almost, and these are my personal experience, you're forced to shelve the pain that you're carrying just, to go through the process of evidence collection, reporting, retelling your story in court, having to deal with people not believing your story, and also the shame that we have been conditioned to attach to our queerness, and any violence that is accompanied by that as well.
Okay.
So to be gentle with yourself and to get to the next day by, doing what you can do just to defend against injustice. And it's okay even for survivors who do not feel that at that time it's okay to report the case, because that does not in any way dismiss the violence that anyone has gone through. And also just realizing that this is perhaps just general, that intimate partner violence can happen to any of us,
Absolutely.
including human rights defenders who defend the rights of other people. So
I like the way that you've humanized that and just saying that it could even happen to us who are human rights defenders. Is it harder being a lawyer who works for the rights of the community, where do you constantly say, this could be me? This could be my story? Or does it hit home doubly as hard?
Absolutely, it hits home doubly as hard. The thing about our current systems and how we've been structurally marginalized as queer people is that any of this could happen to anyone, including cases of economic indignity. Any of us could easily, it's a lived reality of ours that these cases we receive from our siblings is an actual lived reality for so many of us. Forced evictions, sexual violence, physical violence, blackmail and extortion, because we've received a lot of cases that the person, even as a lawyer, the person that is seated opposite me, sometimes is my age mate, sometimes is even a human rights lawyer like myself. So yes, the reality, a lot of times, around say 90% of the times, is real. It hits home a lot of times. 90% of the time, because you can relate to the people. The difference, or rather not the difference, but the thing about having the privilege of being the lawyer that gets to assist our queer siblings go through such situations is that as a queer sibling, as a lawyer, when you're handling that case, sometimes you have to have your head clear so that your emotions do not tamper in any way with this particular case. That you have to be, I have to be objective. So that even as I'm dealing with this case, as much as it unravels me so much, I have to ensure that I'm extremely objective, so that because this is someone's life that has been put on your hands, you have the responsibility of ensuring that you defend against injustice, that even as you're defending against injustice, you're also making sure that even as you're going to that police station, that this will not happen to the next person. So there's also some elements of activism that's embedded to it.
Okay. Are we seeing the legal system, the judiciary, even the criminal process being kinder to LGBTQI people in Kenya? Are you seeing has the needle moved at all?
I think this is my favorite part. I think it has. It has. And I'm sure even you can tell the norms are gradually shifting, as painfully slowly as they are, but the norms are actually shifting very gradually. And I'm looking back at the 2010 constitution. When you look at how the judicial mindset was then and post, there's a very huge difference. Back then, there was a queer man called F.O. who was convicted because of adult consensual sex. That was, I think, in 2009, 2008 or 2006.
Okay.
And over the years, we have seen such significant shift in the legal norms. The attitudes in the judiciary have continuously shifted. When you look at the quality of judgments that are coming out of our courts, I'm so excited about this, so let me just talk about it. There's a very beautiful judgment that has come out of a court in Eldoret. And the judge is affirming us in such beautiful ways. And then you have seen the consistency of the judiciary in, upholding the constitution and the rule of law against all odds, and saying, despite what the popular public morality is, the state cannot shy away from, safeguarding the rights of all Kenyans, and that the state cannot cherry pick the Kenyans to protect and the Kenyans not to protect. So we have seen that coming out of our courtrooms. Freedom of association at the High Court, at the Court of Appeal, and the beautiful jurisprudence we got out of the Supreme Court. And also the first annual examination case, that was, even the quality of the judgments are really changing, where nowadays the judges are not just, ticking a box and saying, this is what the law says, and this is my judgment. There's rationale, there's reasoning. They're giving us legal directions, the way the Supreme Court gave us, legal directions on, they have now created a class of protection that's called sexual orientation. And this is the first time in Kenya's history that the Supreme Court is addressing itself to, legal concerns around sexual orientation and gender identity. And I think that's really beautiful. And of course, judicial conservatism is still a pain in our ass.
Yeah. Say it like it is. Yeah.
No, judicial conservatism is still a pain in our ass, where we see judges opt to choose judicial avoidance, like we saw in the Repeal 162 case.
And this was the case that was trying to challenge the criminalization of homosexual sex in Kenya, an old colonial law. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And what we saw was quite unfortunate, because these are not just judgments. They are pronouncements on the everyday lives of queer people, because it's not just a situation where a judge writes down a judgment or a politician stands and says something. It directly impacts our everyday lives. So these judgments dictate, for lack of a better word, how we are treated by our neighbors, how we are treated by our families, how we are treated by, the general society. So to answer the question is that there has been, I would say, a considerable shift in the legal, just in the legal norms. Even considering cases like blackmail and extortion, initially a lot of these cases would go cold because there was either unwillingness to pursue redress, because the police there was just no goodwill by the police to pursue redress in such cases. But when you get such landmark pronouncements from the most apex court in the country, then it gives legal direction. So now cases of blackmail and extortion can easily, police actually take the initiative. For instance, in Chiloba's case, what we saw was, I don't know whether to say unusual, but the DCI was actually very proactive in consolidating all of the evidence, getting to the bottom of things. And eventually, when you got the 50-year sentence, the DCI posted in their own page
They did?
They did.
Wow.
They posted in their own page. And it's such a significant shift in the psyche, because if this is a statement that is being made by the DCI, then it speaks to deterrence.
Absolutely. But the challenge is, how do we keep that momentum going? How do we constantly, that's one DCI here, and then you'll have another DCI saying something. How do we keep this momentum going? How do we continue raising awareness amongst, even within the justice and legal fraternity, that there are pronouncements that offer care and look at us as individuals as all Kenyans, and saying, yes, there is redress within that. What would you say needs to be done?
I would say what all of us are doing. There's different ways that we are all contributing towards norm shifts. Telling queer stories, humanizing queer people, while at the same time breathing life into the judgments that are coming out of our courts, because the judges have done their part. They've given us this beautiful jurisprudence. So it's us to continuously breathe life into those judgments in our everyday interactions. So for instance, it's just the same way, like, I would not give a police officer a bribe in traffic. And keeping the, what is it called? Just, I would say, keep the everyday practice. There are queer people, there are trans people, there are intersex people who just exist. And that in itself is breathing life into a lot of that jurisprudence. Choosing to say, I'm going to change my name. I'm going to register a queer organization because the law says you can register a queer organization. I'm going to buy property with my wife because the law says,
with my
this
same-sex partner.
I
Yeah.
am going to report this case to the police station. And even though I know that there will be a lot of, still people hold their biases, there will be a lot of bias and all of that. Regardless, I'm still going to report. I'm going to get an OB. I'm going to document this case. So we do that in a lot of ways. We breathe life into the jurisprudence in the way that we organize, in the way that we exist as queer people, even just choosing to,
To
post on TikTok.
Yeah.
Because the law says all of us, and we are here. And we've always been here.
I love the fact that you say the law says all of us as Kenyans. And I think it's absolutely chamuhimu, that we forget that it is for all of us. Masafu, I'm going to read a quote for you, and I would like your reaction. And it says, I have also lost fear. I've lost fear because it's very important that we exist as Kenyans, that we do not allow the fear that has been created on us to extinguish us as queer Kenyans. And these are your own words. Beautiful words. When did you lose this fear?
I lost this fear when I started working alongside very brilliant.
As are you.
Very brilliant queer human rights defenders. Getting to organize next to people like Jerry yourself, Nguru, people who've been in the movement, and just seeing like the people who are moving the pieces and the bravery it takes to put in the work that needs to be put in. Being a handful of queer human rights defenders going against a government that has nothing to lose. And I think I also lost my fear when I came out to myself, because I spent such a huge part of my life living and carrying around people's opinion on my back. And generally just living a life that I wasn't comfortable living, and having to hide parts of myself. So I think the process of coming out to myself had me losing the fear. And the everyday work that we do, honestly.
That's fantastic.
The everyday work that we do, getting to, even just seeing the judgments that we see, and the more that we get to read and learn about the law, practice the law within the lens, within the scope of the work that we do around sexual orientation and gender identity. I could go on and on, but I think those are bits and pieces.
Okay.
Yes.
No, I just think it was
it
an absolutely powerful statement, and you present a lot of hope that we don't hear within the legal fraternity, that stuff is happening. I just want to ask, have you experienced homophobia even within the legal system from your fellow learned friends in the period? And how have you, if that has happened, how do you deal with that?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of times you would be called wewe ndio wakili wa wale watu.
Oh, wow.
From colleagues, other colleagues on the bar. Or, I mean, it comes with a lot of isolation, but that is very little compared to, the queer joy that has been built and the queer joy that we exist in. So yes, we experience a lot of homophobia. Even sometimes you'd go to the police station with your licensed advocate's card, and there would be like, wewe ni wakili but unakaa moja, moja wao.
One of them.
Wewe pia ni shoga. So these things, I think it's very unfortunate because over time you become desensitized to this kind of homophobia, but it does exist. We've been in rooms where we thought we were having dialogues, and some of the things that have been written down have been, so homophobic and so vile. But compared to the queer joy that we exist in, and not to discredit all of that homophobia or downplay it, compared to all of the queer joy that we exist in, it's very beautiful to exist in. So I personally get to teach myself to not live my life carrying the opinions of other people on my back, because I've had to do a lot of work to move, to drop all of those opinions from my back and just live my life and create that environment for different siblings in whatever capacity that I can.
I like the fact that you mentioned queer joy, and that was going to be my next question. How have you managed to wiggle queer joy into your everyday work? And I've seen it, you've mentioned it a number of times, your face lights up, and for someone who doesn't know what that queer joy is, what is it? And how does it come into your activism? And how does it come to your legal practice? How have you managed to mix, changanya all of them together?
I know that our existence in itself is a revolution, and it's a beautiful revolution. Just the freedom that I felt after coming out to myself was very monumental. And I want to continuously, safeguard that, not just in my personal life, but also pour it in my activism, in the work that we do as a collective. So our queer joy is a beautiful revolution, for lack of a better word. So it's a beautiful bubble that you create. Queer joy is, being next to other lesbian lawyers. I thought that I didn't even fathom that there were lesbian lawyers who are going against the government and doing what was considered impossible, just so that, other baby lesbian lawyers like me at myself could, and others could exist in our skin and just, also like exist within the law, because when you're taught the law, you're not taught that the law can exist within the boundaries of equality and non-discrimination. You're taught to think about the law in such an abstract way. So also just finding queer joy within what we do every day. I believe that even if I was in another lifetime, I would say an athlete, I would still wiggle, find my activism in that, and queer joy in that as well.
One of the things I found out that you like doing is conducting community legal education to the public. What does that do to you? Just tell me more a little bit about that, and why does it bring you such joy?
Community legal education gives power to our siblings. It builds agency. And, it's easier to get something when you know where to get it. So just building the power of my siblings is very powerful for me. Using the expertise that I got through law school to, build the power of my siblings is very important, because just, knowing that if this thing happens, this is how evidence is collected. If you need this, this is where to find it. And it reminds me, we once had community legal education, and this lesbian woman in one of the sessions told us they didn't know that, like, we have rights as human beings. So for me, it gives me a lot of joy to, like, build that power of our siblings to exist, to exist without fear, to exist within the law, and also just to pass knowledge. It gives me a lot of joy, because if I had such a situation back then, a lot of things would not have happened. So community legal education is very necessary. Okay. It's extremely necessary for all of us, for all of us in wherever we are. It's important that even our siblings, say in Kakuma refugee camp, say a location like Tarakaniti, or one of those, all of those locations, that we understand what the law says, and that we have the power to agitate, to lose our fear and continue existing, because it's part of the revolution. I love it. Part of the revolution. I wanted to ask, what has been your proudest moment as a lawyer, as an activist? What has been affirming really has been seeing the courts affirm what we've been trying to say for so long, and just seeing the courts affirm what we've been trying to say for so long. When we got the 30-year sentence in Sheila's case, this is Sheila, the late Sheila Lumumba. The late Sheila Lumumba. That was, of course, the sentence was not sufficient. It will never be sufficient. But just seeing the wheels of the law turn, and that this perpetrator was held to account, and the court documents acknowledging the violence in Chiloba's case, and especially Chiloba's case, just the judge acknowledging violence on account of sexual orientation, that was very affirming. I think just the everyday, when you get like a hug from someone who's very extremely grateful of how their case went, or I think those moments, I can't point my finger, but they're quite a bit, yeah. I like the fact that you bring in, I'm learning that especially in the work that you're doing, there's a lot of humanism that comes out, utu, as we say, and thank you for bringing utu into the legal practice, into the activism. And do you think utu is needed in activism? Are we seeing enough utu as we try and agitate for change in Kenya? Absolutely, because one of the things that I've come to learn, especially with the judicial dialogues that we have with judges, because it's necessary for the judges to have an intimate understanding that, if a trans person comes to my court, these are the things that I need to have in mind, and not for this judge to apply themselves to the law with a lens of bias because of their personal convictions or their religious underpinnings. So I've come to learn that it's one thing to agitate and organize within the courtrooms, and it's another thing for judicial officers to actually understand that, like, we're not a foreign concept, we're not aliens, we are Kenyans, we are human beings, we are deserving of the full benefit of the law. So just for judicial officers to also understand that, to have an intimate understanding of, these are the justice needs of queer Kenyans, trans Kenyans, intersex Kenyans. Yes, and to apply that to the law, because the law can both be a double-edged sword. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. In closing, Masafu, I'd like you to share a quote from an activist or, someone who inspires you in the work that you do.
I think I would share the quote of, I draw a lot from other activists, and especially Essie, who says,
this is
Esther Adhiambo, Essie
Adhiambo from another queer activist.
Another queer activist who says that queer organizing is the blueprint of, social justice. And also Njeri Gatero, I draw a lot from Njeri.
She's the director of the National Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission, yes.
I keep forgetting we
No, don't worry.
We're just chatting, yeah. Okay, yes. So yes, I also draw a lot from Njeri, who is such a believer of queer joy. And I think queer joy for me is the quote. Queer joy is revolution. Queer joy is activism. Queer joy is everything, for lack of a better word. And finally, I think Marcus Garvey, who says the moral arc of the law is long but bends towards justice. So it teaches me just how necessary the work that we do is. It may take years, it may take us 10 years in court, but eventually the moral arc of the justice, the moral arc moves towards justice.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you so much, Pia, for being on the Justice Watchers podcast.
Thank you so much. Perhaps let me also ask you what quote speaks to you, and the queer movement generally, and like queer siblings, have drawn a lot of bravery and courage just from your activism. What keeps you going as an activist, and what quote speaks to you?
Wow. That's a really good question. For me, I remember during the World Social Forum in 2007 that was held in Nairobi, a young man from Narok came to the grounds in Kasarani, and he saw it was being covered on Citizen, local media, and he was like, I'm here because I wanted to see, I didn't believe there were other people like me. This is 2007.
In Narok.
Yes, he came all the way to Nairobi just to see other people like him. And I think for me, that was the seed that was sown. So that the work I do is to make sure that other people like him can see other people like me and like himself. So it was him and just his word, to see others like me. And I think for me, that is a work, to just make sure that we are seen.
True.
Yeah, so that is it for me. So thank you for that. And thank you once again for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Asante. You've just been listening to Masafu Okwara from the National Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission here on the Justice Watchers podcast. You can subscribe here on the YouTube channel so that you can keep up to date with all the episodes. And you can also follow Defenders Coalition on their socials. On Instagram and X, they are Defenders KE. On Facebook, they are Defenders Coalition. And you can also get more information from their website, that is defenderscoalition.org. Thank you for watching. This episode was recorded here at Sema Box here in Nairobi, and this has been the Justice Watchers podcast. Asanteni.